Welcome to the video on unit conversions. Um, Unit conversions are going to be one of the most important things that we work with in career math, mainly because they deal with ratios. Practically every career has something to do with converting units. So uh, hopefully we can make sense out of that because that's what we want for you to be able to do. One of the hardest things for people to deal with in conversions is converting conversions that involve decimals. Is one of the biggest problems. I once had a student. I asked the question, "How many feet are in 24 inches?" Because I wanted them to think about how they would solve that problem, and the student just quickly said, "There are two." And I said, "Okay. Now, how many feet are in 7 inches?" And they had no idea how to do the problem. Um, so I wish I had talked to that student more, but he really didn't want to be involved after that. So I had to think about it, and I ultimately realized what the student may have done was say, "Well, 12 plus 12 gives me 24. So there must be 2 feet in 24 inches." The student might have also said 2 times 12 is 24, 2 times 10 is 20, 2 times 2 is 4. And the student, in fact, could have said, well, 24 minus 12, and then 12 minus 12 would give me 0. So it doesn't matter how you solve that problem. The point is, when you answer that question, how many 12s are there in 24, you're actually taking 24 divided by 12. 24 divided by 12 will answer that question. You can answer it using addition, subtraction, or multiplication, if that makes more sense to you, but what you're actually doing is dividing 24 by 12. And I wish I had been able to get the student to realize that, because then the student could have said, well, if I took 24 divided by 12 to get 2, I can take 7 divided by 12 to get, we have to use the calculator for this, but knowing that we need to divide allows us to do that. 0.583 feet. And actually, I'm not sure what the online program is expecting you to do and what their explanations are, but there are a lot of different ways we can do this. We can actually think about the 24, and we can say, I need to know how many 12s are in 24, so I'll take 24 divided by 12, because every 12 inches is a foot. To figure out how many feet, I would just divide. You can also say, well, 24 is the number of inches. The number of feet is going to be smaller because feet are bigger. So that's why I want to divide by 12. If you don't know the 12, you can look it up. I'm not concerned about that. Pretty easy to Google how many inches are in a foot. What I want you to do is be able to think about it. There are some other ways where we could make sure we're doing this correctly. And it involves starting with the 24 inches. And at this point, we want to label it inches. This is actually what we call unit analysis. So I'm going to take my 24 inches, and I'm going to multiply by 1 foot divided by 12 inches. And those of you in the medical programs, when you get into classes where you have to work on dosing, they will pretty much want you to do it this way, because it ends up looking like a fraction. And when we reduce fractions, we cancel things in the numerator and the denominator. And actually, we find we can cancel those inches, and we're just left with 2 feet is the only unit that we're left with. So that's what we call unit analysis. I prefer to do it this way, 24 inches. I use the parentheses times 1 foot per 12 inches. Then the inches cancel. And we get 2 feet. And that type of unit analysis is actually very beneficial, because if we have 5 feet and we want to know how many inches that is, we can say 5 feet times 12 inches per 1 foot. Now the feet cancel. If you prefer, you can just think about the situation. Every foot is 12 inches. I have 5 feet. I have 12 inches 5 times. So I do 5 times 12. It's fine to think about it that way. The point is, we need to be able to decide whether to multiply or divide. When we're changing units, we're either going to multiply or divide. It's important to know which one. And also, decimals are important. Being able to work with decimals allows you to use a calculator. And frankly, in career math, nobody is in a career anymore where you cannot use a calculator to do math. So we really want to be good at using the calculator. And to do that, I'm going to do a little example here. Somebody's decorating a house and they want to put crown molding along the intersection between the ceiling and the walls. So right at the top of the walls. And I decided to do it between the doors because I don't want to have to do 4 different ones, because this is going to take a little bit. Anyway, if I want to add those 2 on the calculator, I have to take them one at a time. I'm going to start with 7 feet, 8 and 5/32 inches. And I'm going to start at the very end. I'm going to take my 5/32, and as we know, we can put that in. 5/32 is actually a division problem. We're going to take 5 things and divide it between 32 people. Each person is going to get 0.15625 of whatever we're dividing, in this case inches. So we've done our division. That gives us our fraction. That's a fractional number of inches. And if we remember, we then have 8 whole inches. So I am going to add 8 to give me the number of inches. I want that to be feet, though. So I'm going to think about it. I have 8 inches. If I measure that in feet, it's going to be smaller. Or I can say I need to know how many 12s are in 8.15625. So I have to divide by 12. And that actually gives me the number of feet that is equivalent to 8 and 5/32 inches. Now I add the number of feet. And I get 7.679. Before I do anything, I'm going to clear my memory and store that in memory. 7.769. I think that was right. 7697, because I should round up. I'm not going to use that number that I've written down, though. I just wrote it down for reference. Because I have rounded off, I have lost some of that accuracy. When I put it in memory, though, I didn't lose the accuracy. So now I have to do my 15 feet 5 7/8 inches. And I'm going to clear my calculator. And I forgot it already, 5 7/8 inches. So I'm going to do 7 divided by 8. And that gives me the decimal number of inches that's equivalent to 7/8. I add the 5. And now I have to convert that to feet. Once again, I know inches going to feet, I'm going to divide by 12. You can get that any way you like. As long as you have a good way of making sure you divide when you're supposed to divide, multiply when you're supposed to multiply. So 5 7/8 inches is approximately 0.4896 feet. I'm going to add my 15 feet. So I have 15.4896. So this is 15.4896 approximately. But I don't need to worry about approximately because I can see about 30, 25, a lot of decimal places. And there's actually a lot more in the computer that we're not even seeing. We'll worry about that later. I'm going to add the two now because I need to see how much crown molding I have to buy. I'm going to do the memory recall. And as you notice, all the decimals are still there. I push equals, and I now know that I need 23.1692708 and a bunch of 3's feet. So the question now is, how do I write that? I'll write 23.1693. And these are feet. We're no longer feet and inches. We have decimal feet now. But I want to go back to feet and inches. So I know if I have 23.1693 feet, I at least have 23 feet. So I've taken care of the 23. I'm going to take that out. I'm going to say minus 23. And then that gives me 0.1692708 and a bunch of 3's feet. Now to change that to inches, I want to multiply by 12. For every foot, I have 12 inches, so I multiply the number of feet times 12, and I get 2.03125 inches. I am just going to write down the 2, though, because that's the main, that's all I know right now. And then I'm going to get rid of that 2. I'm going to subtract it because we've got that taken care of. And now I've got my 0.03125. And I need to change that into halves of an inch or quarters of an inch or eighths of an inch. There's a clue that you're going to need 30 seconds, but a lot of times you don't have that. A lot of times you're actually going to have to round off. So to start off with, we do times 2. That gives me the number of half inches. Still don't have a whole half of an inch. So times 2. Now I have quarters of an inch. So I've multiplied by 4. I've multiplied my decimal times 4. That's the number of quarter inches. Times 2 again gives me the number of eighths of an inch. I multiply that by 2. That's the number of 16ths of an inch. And I can already see this is 16ths of an inch. So, or 30 seconds of an inch. So I multiply by 2 again, and that gives me 1/32 of an inch. So I have 2 and 1/32 inches. And I can do the same thing with gallons, quarts, pints. So I have a recipe that calls for 1 gallon, 3 quarts, and 1 pint of vinegar. So I can say, if I want to change pints to gallons, let's change pints to quarts first. I have 1 pint, and there are 2 pints in a quart. So I have to multiply by 1 quart per 2 pints. And actually, with unit analysis, we can keep going. And now I have to change my quarts to gallons. There's 1 gallon in 4 quarts. So that multiplication, 1 times 1 over 2 times 1 over 4, would give me the number of gallons in 1 pint. And I do a similar thing with 3 quarts, except I don't have to go quite as far. 3 quarts times 1 gallon per 4 quarts. So my vinegar equals 1 plus 1 over 8 plus 3 over 4. And if I want to just do that in the calculator, I can think about it this way. So my 1 pint, if I have 1 pint, to see how many quarts, I divide by 2. So I have half a quart, which makes sense. Now I need to convert quarts to gallons. I'm going to a bigger unit, so I'm going to have a smaller number. I divide by 4. I get 0.125 pints. I'm going to use my memory again. I'm going to clear my memory and store that in memory. Now I'm going to take my 3 quarts, and I know I'm going to go to gallons, so actually 3 quarts. Quarts actually means quarter, so I have 3/4 of a gallon. And I divide by 4. 3 divided by 4 gives me 0.75 gallons. And so now I can take my 0.75, I can add my 1 gallon. And now I'm going to add my 1 pint, which I put in memory recall. And so now I have the number of gallons, 1.875. So I have 1.875. My new amount of vinegar, since I want to do a batch and a half, is 1.875 times 1.5. And so now I go back to my calculator, times 1.7 times 1.5. 2.8125. So now I know I'm going to need 2 gallons. I should have written my units. This is gallons. I'd like for you to pay attention to that. Hopefully I can pay attention to it as well. 2 whole gallons So I've got my gallons written down. I'm going to subtract the gallons out. And this is the decimal amount of gallons. I'm going to convert that to quarts. There's 4 quarts per gallon. So I have 4 times as many quarts as gallons. I multiply by 4, and I get 3.25 quarts. And so I'm going to write down my 3 quarts. And having taken that into account, I'm going to subtract the 3. So I'm just down to the number of gallons that actually represents the number of quarts at this point that actually represents the number of pints. So I'm going to say times 2 because there are 2 pints per quart, and I have 2 gallons, 3 quarts, 1/2 pint that I will need.